Okay, welcome everyone. This is the Successful Mindsets Unlocked podcast, and I'm your host, Dr. Ryan C.Warner. I'm a consulting psychologist, a father, a husband, and I'm really passionate about improving inclusion and leadership and diversity in the workplace so that organizations thrive. And Unsuccessful Mindsets Unlocked, we explore the strategies, the habits, and perspectives of accomplished industry leaders to uncover the secrets of success. And if you're listening, if you're open to wanting to improve your optimal potential and helping you enhance your professional and personal development, feel free to go to www.rcwarnerconsulting.com and learn more about our coaching programs and how we can best support you as an individual or your organization so that you can reach your optimal potential. So today we have Julie, and I really want you to introduce yourself, tell about your journey, about your role. So I'll be asking some questions so listeners can get to know you better. And in turn, hopefully we can, provide some practical strategies so that listeners can implement so that they can continue to advance that quote unquote successful mindset. So we know that everyone views success differently, right? It's very subjective. And I'm curious first, before we go into that, tell listeners more about yourself and, about your background and your current role. That'll be helpful.
Yeah, for sure. Thanks for having me. So I'm Julie Branscombe, currently the head of diversity, equity, and inclusion for a North American telecom. It's a public company. We're based in Montreal, Quebec, and also on the US side, just outside of Boston. I started my career 25 years ago with TD Bank as a speechwriter for the senior executive team, sort of a long and winding road. I went on to lead several teams across a variety of businesses. But in the last sort of 10 years, I hit my stride, specializing in diversity, equity, and inclusion, both at TD Bank as well as a global pension fund where I was a consultant and advisor to a number of their subsidiaries, potato chip factories, avocado farms, you name it.
Oh,
I also advised the Canadian government on their gender strategy for the military, as well as the Canadian government's accessibility legislation. So I sort of found my way into diversity and inclusion because I was passionate about it. Myself and my siblings were adopted from different families. I have one daughter who's dyslexic, and I think that taught me firsthand about the power of difference and the importance of inclusion to maximize the success of the greater sum.
hmm.
And I sort of see how my career all connected retrospectively, right?
Oh, well, I mean, so many phenomenal experiences. I mean, you've been able to lead others. You've been able to work with very high performing organizations. And with that, was it a linear path for you? Like, did you always know that you wanted to do this type of work, especially in the diverse, equity, and inclusion space?
No, I think when I was writing predominantly for senior leaders, I wrote a lot about sort of the women's investor strategy, the women's entrepreneurial strategy. And I kind of got into the space first of women in leadership. And I was super passionate. And then that then sort of branched out to the broader inclusion of all people. And I found myself more on the HR side of things. So I like to say I sort of straddle HR and PR, if you will. But I have had the great fortune of supporting many senior executives along the way. I've learned some of their kind of key tricks as they progress through their careers as well.
Wow. Yeah. So when I hear like you've been able to consult with senior leaders and advise them and make a difference in organizations, I would assume, hey, that's success, right? I would look at you as a very successful person, but I'm curious, how do you define success? When you think of that term, what comes to mind for you?
Yeah, I think my definition of success has definitely changed over the years. But overall, I'd say, for myself and also for the people I've worked with along the way, I can see them trying to kind of define their legacy. And I really think it's about feeling connected to the work, feeling that you're making a difference, feeling your impact. Sometimes that difference is broad based in the work that I do, like introducing new policies or practices or workforce representation goals. But other times it's very individual, So what is your sphere of influence as a leader? How are you helping other leaders? How are you helping people become more inclusive? And how are you helping sort of the everyday colleague find their way and understand the system and how to navigate sort of the unspoken rules, if you will, in the system.
Mm,
I once coached a leader who, he refused to tell a story about having a stutter. He was a very, very senior executive in wealth management, and he just would not share his story of having a stutter. And I kept saying, that's kind of what makes you. And when you unleash that story, you're going to feel a sense of following, right? You're going to show your vulnerability, and other people are going to be able to relate to you. So he
mm,
held back for a long time, but in the 6 months before he retired, he did eventually tell the story, and he got this massive following on our internal Facebook site, sort of overnight. And he said, I had no idea that really is the crux of leadership, right? That
mm,
it's about the human aspect of it. He thought it was about hard driving results, when in fact he had to put himself into it.
mm. Wow. So that power of self-disclosure and vulnerability, right, is essential, right? And you've seen that. And also the way you define success is about feeling connected with what you're doing. I mean, I think about like, what, how can we connect our why, right? I look at our why as something that drives us, fuels us to, engage in, what we do, both personally and professionally. And if we feel connected with something each and every day, right, then we're more satisfied, we're more engaged, right? And that enhance our overall performance. However, research shows that a lot of people in the workplace do not feel engaged, do not feel connected to the mission or the vision of the organization, right? So with that, I mean, I think there's a lot to be done there to support others. Because if we enhance our work life satisfaction, that's going to improve our overall well-being as well.
Definitely. Yep.
Yeah. So with you, is there any particular habits, or ways that you've been able to grow like mentally, right? Because I feel like it always starts with the mindset. Um, and I'm curious, let's dig into your mindset. When like challenges arise, how do you approach those challenges psychologically and mentally?
Yeah, I think the first thing, it's sort of a practice that I've adopted, but the first thing is to recognize that every change encounters some level of resistance, right? And plan
Mm,
for it, and name it. Whatever your challenge is, name it. I mean, you're going to have some resistance yourself going through change. Other people are going to have organizational change. In the work that I do, it's taking an organization that's very resistant and helping them change.
mm,
And I think that you recognizing it, naming it, and also seeking out mentors has really helped me a lot. Several years ago, I sought mentorship from the CEO of a consulting firm in Canada, and he said, Julie, what you're experiencing is major resistance to change. And he said, I sum it up like this: some people will get on the bus, other people will never get on the bus, and other people will get on the bus if you give them a reason.
mm,
And it's that last group where you want to spend your time, right? And so when I think about my why and I try to connect, or I have down days, I think about kind of my audiences and what I'm doing, the bigger picture. And I
mm,
think that helps.
mm. Yeah. Yeah, so because sometimes it's easy to just get caught into the weeds of things in our day to day, but it's harder to see that bigger picture. Yeah. So what's that bigger picture for you? What's like ultimate success look like for you in the future?
Yeah, I mean, I think what I'm here to do, and that the legacy that I'm doing, is driving an equitable, safe, inclusive, and respectful workplace. Whatever company or government I'm helping to
Mm,
do that, right? And I stay focused on that overall why. And if I think about all the small actions that are building upon each other, then
mm,
I can feel my impact. Sometimes you can lose sight of your impact if you first off, if you just look at each action in isolation, right?
mm,
But also if you try to look too long and too hard for something really big, you can lose sight of it as well. So I
mm,
try to keep in mind all those small actions that come together and build on one another. And I think again, seeking out other people. So some days you feel I had a friends say, some days you feel like screaming at the darkness, but what you need to do is you need to be the one to light the candle, right? And that stays with me on my kind of tougher days.
Yeah, it's interesting. Organizational change is very similar to like individual change. So myself as a consultant psychologist, and I do a lot of work as well in the diversity, equity, and inclusion space. I've noticed that when working with individuals, there's often resistance as well. Hey, I want to reach my optimal potential, for instance, maybe in executive coaching, improve my leadership development skills, but I've been doing the same thing for 30 years, right? And it's hard for me to think differently, right, at this stage of my career. And then you go into organizations and they were like, hey, we've been established for, X amount of years. We've been able to achieve X amount of revenue. Why should we change now? Why should we do something different, right? Why should we talk about microaggressions in the workplace or anti-racism, and things like that, right? So, I see those similarities on the individual and organizational type of, perspective. And yeah, so it's interesting that, you talk about like, looking at the small obtainable steps, right? Seeing the big picture and, celebrating the little wins, right? Because the little wins add up, those who make, meaningful, sustainable change. Yeah.
They really do. Even if you look at the sort of the psychology of athletes, right? And where do they draw from to get their confidence? It's
Mm,
usually because they name a time they were successful, right? They reach back. And
mm,
and that really has stuck with me through my career because there are days you feel like you're pushing a boulder uphill, and
mm,
it's just a battle and everyone's kind of coming at you
mm,
and trying to make you drop that boulder.
mm.
So that's what I keep in mind, the times I was successful and the small wins and that they're adding up.
Yeah. So when thinking about success, we also have to think about the challenges and the barriers that may arise. And I'm curious for you, what is that boulder that you're trying to push up the hill right now? What are some maybe roadblocks or challenges with, trying to achieve your goal of creating equitable workplaces?
Yeah, I mean, I think my job is a little bit like being a marriage counselor, if you will, right? So you've got to kind of get the two sides to come together. You got to get the company to step up a little bit and be the best it can be in terms of mitigating bias in processes and standardizing processes and developing policies, et cetera. And then you've got to actually work with leaders to come to the table and have them recognize the systemic bias that's inherent in the system,
Mm,
and also the biases that exist within themselves, right? And help them name it. And then you've also got to work with everyday colleagues and help them understand the spoken and the unspoken rules at play and how to navigate the system. And it's kind of about bringing everyone together at the
mm,
same time. That's where the rubber meets the road. And I mean, I think it's a challenge for sure, but I think it's an opportunity. I've seen companies just really when it comes together and they understand the specific behaviors involved in being an inclusive leader or being an ally, that's where the culture starts to shift.
mm. Can you tell me more about, yeah, what helps bring individuals together? What have you seen that works the best when it comes to, ensuring that diverse perspectives are heard, ensuring that, individuals from all different roles and different ranks are able to come together to accomplish a mission? What has helped you accomplish that goal in the past?
A few things, one is simple things like podcasts, where colleagues tell their stories and share their experiences. So everyone around them can understand that, there's different sets of experiences and different sets of rules for different groups of people. That's one thing. The other thing that's actually been, as much as some people like to say training doesn't work, I've been leading a workshop on inclusive leadership the last 2 years for all 800 of our people leaders. And it's sort of 2 hours where we teach Deloitte's kind of key set of inclusive leadership competencies, or the 6 C's, if
Mm,
you will. Deloitte's done a ton of research to show that these are the critical capabilities or qualities that are required to drive inclusive leadership. And
mm,
when you break it down, when you really break those qualities down for leaders and help them understand how to demonstrate behavior, uh, the light bulb goes on, not for everybody at the same time. Some people respond to different things or different analogies, but it really, really does work. And breaking out into smaller groups and having leaders share how they demonstrate one quality versus another, I think helps people assess, well, where am I at on that? How am I doing on the 6 C's? Where could I double down
mm,
on? Where do I need to focus? And it's really, really small things. You got leaders who they'll invite 3 members of their team to play golf on a Friday and leave everybody out. Or on Monday morning, like these little micro inequities. Monday morning comes and they'll ask the same guy to go talk about the game on Sunday, right, and grab a coffee, but they're not really realizing the impact of those sort of inequitable behaviors to other members on the team. When you call leaders on it, oh, I see that now, you know?
mm, mhm. So the training piece here, because there's a lot of research out there that says that, these one and done trainings may not be helpful. So with you though, it seems like providing them not only information and knowledge, but also practical type of examples that can enhance their insight that ultimately can fuel change and help individuals reach success on an individual and organizational level. Um, yeah.
Yeah, I don't think it's enough to say, don't do this, just don't do this. Well, I mean,
Mm,
it's like raising kids. Don't touch you don't touch the light switch, whatever it is, you've got to kind of redirect them.
mm,
So it is a little bit of don't do this, but it's more about here's some things that you can practically do to
mm,
demonstrate how you're an ally and how you're a leader and help build their cultural competence overall, right? I don't think people think enough about the sort of ingrained norms or cultures that they themselves grew up with and
mm,
how that's very different depending on which part of the world or how you were socialized. And
mm,
so I've worked with leaders to help them understand, there's women on your team that they grew up in different countries and they're not actually socialized to speak up and say that they want a promotion. It just they're just not. And so, it's helping leaders kind of get out of their own blind spots.
mm. Yeah. So yeah, that's a approach I frequently take as well when doing trainings and facilitation. There's an interpersonal perspective, right? Like how do you interact with team members better, right? How do you not leave people out, for instance, when you engage in certain activities? And how do you obviously mitigate the impact microaggressions and bias may have, but also looking inward, that intrapersonal perspective, right?
Mhm.
So yeah, how do my past experiences and my upbringing and the media I consumed and how I was wired as a child, how does that impact my views of others right now, right? I like that you're taking that multifaceted perspective, and I like how you're saying it's not just one thing that's going to quote unquote fix these issues, right? There's many different things you have to tackle it from multiple angles, and in turn, that's how you create success and change.
Absolutely. And we're not in it alone, we if we take on the mandate ourselves and we say it's just on us, that can be very daunting. The reality of it is we all have a role to play in having an inclusive workplace. And, it's as simple as I heard a colleague say, well, we don't have any Kleenex here. And I'm thinking to myself, like, isn't that just a perfect point? We'll go and get a box of Kleenex and expense it. Like we all can sort of take over and create the environment that we want to work in.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so some key themes are standing out today that I'm learning from you, right? Success, ultimately for you is, being being attached to, maybe a bigger mission, being engaged in the work that you do, recognizing that it's slow, steady, small steps over time that builds success and builds progress. And also, it seems like there's some interpersonal reflection, that you need to engage in when you think about what success looks like, right? And what's your why and what drives you, what motivates you. Anything you would add onto that, for some key takeaways for listeners today?
Well, I think that's exactly it. It's a really good summary, and I think people do have to think of their legacy a little bit. How do they want to be remembered? What's the positive impact that they want to have in the organization, or whatever your sphere of influence is on your team, or as a leader, or as a colleague. How do you want to be remembered? If we can change our perspective to think about that, it becomes a little bit easier and clearer and more defined.
Yeah, great. Yeah, so this has been really insightful. I really enjoyed this conversation. I'm curious, how can listeners find you? How can they reach out?
I mean, for sure, reach out on LinkedIn. So it's Julie Branscombe. I think there's only one of me. And I always respond. I'm always up for a coffee chat wherever, whichever part of the globe people are in, and I love to get connected.
Yeah, great. Any last thoughts?
That's really it. I mean, for other people doing similar work, I like to say, remember kind of who you are at heart. You're probably a builder, a trailblazer, an advocate, an agitator, a vigilante. It really behooves sort of all of us in fortunate positions to open doors for other people. That's certainly my legacy, and I know it is for many people doing this work. So just kind of keep up the good fight.
Yeah, great. I really appreciate that. And again, I'm the host of Dr. Ryan C.Warner, and this is Successful Mindsets Unlocked, in which we explore the strategies, habits, and perspectives of accomplished industry leaders to uncover the secrets of success. So, again, if you're looking for additional support, if you want to reach your optimal potential or help your organization reach their optimal potential by enhancing leadership, inclusion, and wellness in the workplace, feel free to reach out. Until then, look forward to the next episode and really appreciate it, Julie, for serving as today's guest.
Thanks, Ryan.